So to be able to use the NIRS, you first need to be able to find the vastus lateralis muscle on the subject. So to do that, I use a hand length. So from my thumb to my pinky, start at the top of their patella and stretch out to about your pinky off to the lateral side of their leg. Use the probe and put it where your pinky is. And usually right around there is the vastus lateralis. You can double check it by going more to the center of their leg, so right above the kneecap. And you usually can see these two circles of muscles on the screen, so you know that you're in the right place. And then you go more lateral again, and you should see the slanted line, and this is your vastus lateralis muscle. So once we're there, we're gonna freeze unfreeze and hold it for 5 seconds, just so that we get a good recording of it. We'll store that. And then before we let go, we wanna make sure to mark it with a Sharpie. You don't need a huge mark. I usually just do a dot or a line on either side of the probe, so that when I take it off, I know exactly where it is, so that the NIRS can go right where that mark, right in the middle of those two marks. So once you've found the vastus lateralis on the subject's leg, you can also use that measurement on the ultrasound to measure skin thickness. But to finish getting the NIRS ready, we're going to come down here, and this is our NIRS machine. We want to make sure that it's on for at least 15 minutes before we're going to calibrate it. So you can tell it's on when the green light is on above the power. We want to make sure to keep all these little wires covered in the black tart, because they're really sensitive to light and it can screw things up. And then on the computer, you can just bypass the password. There is no password, so just get onto the computer, choose the Oxy TS. Let's take these off. So if you double click on that and open the NIRS program, this is what it'll look like. And to begin, we want to come up here to displays, to monitor graph, and click open. And we want to switch these graphs that are being monitored to probe B. So just click on this bottom one without scrolling or anything. It should just be this bottom one. Click on that and click on open, and it switches the graphs to be on probe B. Now to start calibrating, the first thing we have to do is come up here and click on this button to start it. And once you've done that, it's easiest to switch windows to the numeric window, so that it shows all of these numbers and these absorption and scattering numbers, which are the preset values on the calibration blocks for the NIRS probe, and that's what we want to calibrate to. So again, we also need to come up here and switch to detector B, or probe B, since that's the only probe that we have and that we're using. Now we come back down here. We want to make sure that this probe B is sitting on our calibration block, the red block. You want to just make sure that you're holding it firmly on there. You don't have to press super hard, but firm enough that it's picking it up. And when you come back to the computer, click on the on button. So when the black dot is filled in, it's now on. But then we also have to hit the auto bias button for it to start to increase the sensitivity, so it'll actually pick up the absorption and scattering numbers. So now that the bar is in the middle here, we know that it's on and it's working. And to calibrate, we want to come up here to calibration at the top, and we want to choose to calibrate B, or probe B. Now as we're still pressing firmly on the block, this bar will fill up with blue bars to do the full calibration. And if blue bars aren't coming up in this window, then you're probably not pressing firmly enough. Once it's complete, that window will go away and we're back to this regular screen. So to check that it calibrated correctly, we want to check these numbers right here and right here. Oh, we want to check that this absorption for 830 should match the number that's right here. So 0.156 for absorption for 830, that should be about the same. So it's measuring at 0.158 or 0.159, which is really close to the 0.156. So that should be good. Then we want to check the absorption for the 684 wave, which should be about 0.159, which again is pretty close. It's a little high, but it's pretty close, so that should be good. We then also want to check the scattering numbers. So for the scattering for 830, if we come over here, it should be 4.5 for scattering for 830, and it's right around there. And then the scattering for 684 is measuring at 5.2, and it should be about 5.28. So it's really close. So we know that the calibration is good. So then we're going to come over here and turn the probe off, because we're going to move it. Anytime you move the probe, you want to make sure that you turn it off because it's really sensitive to light. So now we'll come back down to the block and we're going to switch the block. So instead of the calibration block now, we're going to move that one back and we're going to use this yellow block to check the calibration. So this block has its own values for absorption and scattering so that we can check to make sure that it will pick up the correct values. So all we have to do is put the probe on the checking block and turn it on. We don't have to hit calibrate or anything. You just turn it on. And now you're just going to check that these numbers match these numbers on this sticky note on the computer. So for absorption for 830, it should be about 0.106. So absorption for 830, it's a little high, it's 0.114. And then the absorption for 684 should be 0.110. And it's about 0.31, which again is a little bit high. But usually if it's within a tenth of these values on the sticky note, then it should be accurate. Then we also want to check the scattering values. So scattering for 830 should be reading at 9.7, which it is. It's pretty right on. And then the scattering value for 684 should be reading at 10.9. And here it's reading at 11.6. So again, it's a little bit high. But again, it's pretty close, so it should be okay. One thing that can also make your values come off a little bit low or a little bit high is pressing too hard or not hard enough on the block. So just make sure that you're using the same amount of force with your hand pressing on the block for the calibration and for the check. And once those values are all good, then the NIRS is completely calibrated and ready to use. So now that the NIRS is calibrated, to start collecting data for a subject, we want to come up here to File, and it's not going to let me do it because I already did it, but you'll click on New and it'll bring up the window that you can type in a file name and save it, and that's where you just need to enter the subject's ID and the date that you're doing these tests and click Save, and then it'll bring you back to this regular screen. Then you don't have to hit start or anything because it's already started when we clicked this top button when we were calibrating. So those two steps are already done. So now it's saved and it's being recorded for that specific subject. So now to measure it and to see the data we're collecting, we're going to come back over to this computer and log in. And the password is just password. We're going to come up here to this BioPack file and double click to open it up. And this is just a generic file that we're going to save for the specific subject. So it'll open these two windows. And we're going to come over here and click on File. We're going to Save As. I'm just going to save this to the desktop for now, but you'll want to save it in the Studies file under the Subjects file. So you can see over here some of the subjects in the past were HT5 and 6 and ETC2. You'll want to save this file in the specific Subjects file. So once you've typed in the name of it and the date and what this data actually is, so for this we want to make sure to include in the name that this is NIRS data, not PLM data. And you'll click Save. And this will be just as is because we haven't started anything yet. So we'll want to get the probe onto the subject now. So to get the probe on the subject, again, be careful that you don't show the bottom of the laser to the ceiling with all the lights, because that's where the laser is and we don't want it to get messed up by all the lights. Usually we'll have the subject in position for whatever we're doing. So if you're doing this during a bike test, you want them standing behind the bike so that they're already in position close enough to the bike that they can get onto the bike once this is on. Or if you're doing this while doing a resistance study, then you want them sitting here. You can just stay nice and relaxed. We're just going to make sure that this circle is in the middle of these two lines. So once it's there, you're going to wrap this strap around. You want to lift your leg for me. And this part just slides right in. You can unvelcro the strap and tighten the strap as well. Then we usually use the conform tape to also wrap around it and cover the entire probe. So this is the conform tape. Then we're going to hold this in place. We're going to have them lift their leg again. And we're just going to keep wrapping this around until it covers the whole probe, so it keeps it from getting any light from the ceiling lights. So I'm just going to do this little data reading. Yours taped up. You want to come back over here to this computer, and we're going to come up here and click Start. You can also click on Display and Auto Scale Waveforms so that it'll auto scale these two specific measurements that it's taking in from the NIRS probe. This is the saturation of oxygen that it's reading and the total deoxygenated blood. And so as it's reading that, you can tell it's accurate because you come over here to this percentage and it should be somewhere around that 70 to 90 range. And so as this is reading, we know that this is reading accurately, and we can also double check this by coming back over to the other computer and coming here to the displays, and we're in the numeric table right now, so we're going to go back to monitor graph, open, probe B again, and it'll bring us back here to these graphs. And because we just came into this graph, it's only going to start showing the data from the time we started looking at these graphs. So as you can see, it's starting to show all these different spikes. And these are the 4 measurements that we're getting from the NIRS probe, rather than the other computer is only currently showing 2, but we can look at all 4 on the other computer as well. So then once the subject is done with the test for this study with the NIRS, all you have to do is come over here and click Stop to stop recording the data, and then you're going to come back over to the other computer and we're going to click on the off button so that the bar comes down to the bottom, and it's now off. So now the probe is safe to take off of the subject.